Well, me and my lady had our first big fight.
Welcome to another Hollywood Remembers video. Today, we're going to pay a heartfelt tribute to the American stars we've recently lost, as well as other beloved figures around the world who have touched our lives. Before we begin, if you relate to this content, please leave a like. It helps the channel continue bringing you tributes made with respect and affection. Thank you for being here. Now, let's begin.
Kirsty Duncan was 59 years old, a Canadian politician, a medical geographer, and a long-time member of Parliament who represented Etobicoke North from 2008 until 2025. Today, news of her passing is being felt across Canada, and especially in the community she served for so many years. Kirsty Duncan moved through public life with a rare mix of science and service. Before many Canadians knew her as an MP, she was already asking hard questions about global health and human survival. In 1998, she led an expedition tied to one of history's darkest chapters, the 1918 Spanish flu pandemic. That journey later became a book, documenting her search for answers about how that deadly virus spread and what the world could still learn from it. In Parliament, she carried that same seriousness of purpose. She was known as someone who valued evidence, preparation, and long-term thinking. Not flashy, not loud, but steady. For the people of Etobicoke North, she showed up year after year, listening, working, and staying committed. Those who worked with her often spoke about her discipline and her belief that public service mattered, that it could still make a difference. Kirsty Duncan's life leaves behind a record of curiosity, responsibility, and care for others. And for many, that's how she will be remembered.
Kiana Underwood was 33 years old. Many people first knew her as a kid on Nickelodeon, a bright, confident presence who appeared on All That, and later as the voice of Fuchsia Glover on Little Bill. For a lot of viewers, those shows weren't just entertainment. They were part of growing up. Saturday nights, after school, the TV on in the background, and Kiana was part of that. She was killed Friday in New York City in a hit-and-run, according to law enforcement. Reports say it happened in Brooklyn, and the driver involved left the scene. It's a hard thing to process, because it's not just a loss. It's a loss wrapped in shock and in anger, and in that feeling of, how does this happen? Child actors can get remembered as characters, as moments, as quick scenes we can still picture years later. But Kiana wasn't a memory. She was a person who grew up, who carried her own stories, and who deserved the chance to live the rest of her life in peace, far beyond what we saw on screen. People who watched her back then remember the energy she brought, the way she fit into an era of TV that felt fun and simple, where laughter came easy. And on Little Bill, her voice became familiar in a different way, softer, every day, like someone you'd hear in your living room without even thinking about it. This is a heartbreaking ending to a life that started in the public eye, and today a lot of people are going back to those old clips, remembering that spark. Kiana Underwood mattered. She made people smile, and she should still be here.
Roger Lawrence Ewing was 83 years old. For a lot of Americans, he'll always be remembered as Deputy Marshal Thad Greenwood on Gunsmoke, that young, steady presence in Dodge City who brought a quieter kind of strength to the show. Roger Ewing died on December 18, 2025, in Morro Bay, California. His loved ones shared the news publicly, and since then, fans have been going back to those episodes, remembering a time when Gunsmoke was part of the weekly rhythm of life. He was born January 12, 1942, and he came along at just the right moment in television history. On Gunsmoke, he wasn't trying to overpower the room. He played Thad as someone decent, capable, sometimes a little wide-eyed, but ready to learn, ready to help, ready to stand beside Marshal Matt Dillon when it mattered. He appeared in more than 50 episodes during the mid-1960s, and that's enough to leave a real mark. especially on a series that meant so much to so many families for so many years. If you grew up with Gunsmoke, you probably remember the feeling of it more than any single plot. The faces, the voices, the calm after the dust settled. Roger Ewing was one of those faces, and he'll be missed.
Kenny Chesney is more than a country superstar with sold-out stadiums and summer anthems echoing across America. His story is not about charts or trophies. It is about freedom and the quiet cost of choosing it again and again. From the outside, his life looks simple. Songs about beaches, back roads, youth, escape. A man who seems permanently in motion, untouched by the weight that follows most long careers. But behind that image exists a more complex truth, a personality shaped early by opposing forces that never stopped pulling at him. He grew up in a small Tennessee town where structure mattered. Responsibility came early. Expectations were not spoken loudly, but they were understood. There was a clear idea of what a good life looked like: stability, routine, predictability. Yet alongside that firmness existed emotional safety, a sense that effort was valued and curiosity allowed. Kenny learned early that strength and sensitivity could coexist, though not without friction. That friction became formative. He was not a loud rebel. He did not run away. Instead, he internalized the tension. Part of him longed for motion, for horizons without fences. Another part wanted order, approval, and control. Many years later, this same internal conflict would define both his success and his solitude. Music entered his life not as a dream of fame, but as protection. A guitar gave him permission to feel without explaining himself. Songs created distance between emotion and exposure. On stage, he could express longing, loss, and joy without having to resolve them privately. The talent was not a gift, it was a strategy. When his career began to move, it did so without chaos. Albums found their audience. Radio embraced his sound. Each success reinforced a narrative that he was doing everything right. Yet even early on, there was a subtle pattern: movement over stillness, tour buses over routes, momentum over pause. What made Kenny Chesney compelling to audiences was not technical complexity, it was recognition. Listeners heard themselves in his music, the wish to leave, to simplify, to belong somewhere else. What they did not see was that he was chasing the same thing. By the time fame arrived fully, the framework of his life was already set. Work came first, motion felt safe, silence did not. And while the world saw freedom, Kenny was quietly learning that choosing it meant walking alone. This story does not begin with success. It begins with a question he would spend decades answering. How free can a person be without losing themselves? Kenny Chesney did not explode into fame. He advanced, slowly, deliberately. Album by album, tour by tour, his career grew the way trust grows, earned, not forced. In the 1990s, country music rewarded authenticity more than spectacle. Kenny understood that instinctively. He did not chase trends. He leaned into familiarity, small towns, long drives, memories tied to place. His voice carried warmth, not dominance. His lyrics did not shout, they invited. The audience responded because the music felt lived in. These were not fantasies, they were postcards from real emotional landscapes. And with every release, his position solidified. Gold turned to platinum, venues expanded. The crowd got bigger, but the message stayed personal. Success, however, brings acceleration, and acceleration leaves little space for reflection. Touring became constant. A rhythm formed that rarely broke. Album, promotion, road, repeat. The structure rewarded productivity, not presence. Each milestone reinforced the idea that forward motion was not only good, it was necessary.
In that environment, stillness began to feel dangerous. Relationships required time. Time demanded staying put. Staying put felt like losing momentum, and momentum had become synonymous with survival. Kenny did not reject intimacy consciously. He simply never stopped moving long enough for it to take shape. The world saw a man living the dream. Privately, he lived out of suitcases and schedules. Hotels blurred, seasons passed unnoticed, applause replaced routine. The stage became both sanctuary and shield. There was no scandal attached to this period, no implosion, just quiet trade-offs that went largely unseen. The cost of success was not money or reputation, it was continuity. When he eventually tried to step into a more conventional life, the gap became obvious. Partnership requires presence. Marriage demands stillness at least some of the time. For someone whose identity had been built around motion, that adjustment proved difficult. The failure of that attempt did not harden him, it clarified him. He did not walk away bitter, he walked away aware. Aware that the life he had built, carefully, intentionally, left little room for shared space. Not because he lacked depth, but because his foundation had been poured elsewhere. Ironically, this awareness did not slow his career, it sharpened it. The music that followed carried more distance, more observation, less urgency. He sang less about chasing and more about noticing. The voice matured, the tone softened. Success had given him everything he worked for. What it could not give him was stillness.
Kenny Chesney reached a point in his career where growth was no longer the question. Authority was established. His tours became events. His albums arrived with expectations already met before release. By most industry standards, there was nothing left to prove. Yet internally, something had shifted. The music began to slow down, not in tempo, but in intention. The stories felt more observational, less urgent. The characters in his songs were no longer running towards something. They were standing still long enough to understand what had already happened to them. This was not reinvention, it was refinement. Kenny never announced a turning point. He did not frame it as personal growth. The change appeared quietly, embedded in phrasing, space, restraint. Where earlier songs chased summer endlessly, these began to acknowledge that summer does not last, and that its value lies in knowing that. He became more protective of his private life. Interviews shortened, explanations disappeared. The less he spoke publicly, the clearer his internal priorities became. This was not withdrawal, it was boundary setting. At the same time, his bond with audiences deepened. The crowds were still massive, but the connection felt different. Less spectacle, more recognition. Fans were aging alongside him. They were no longer listening for escape alone. They were listening for understanding. That mutual aging created trust. Kenny's work ethic never softened. If anything, it became more disciplined. But discipline was no longer about pushing forward at all costs. It was about sustainability, about knowing when to step back without disappearing. The beach imagery that once symbolized escape now represented balance. Water as grounding, not avoidance. Space as clarity, not distance. These themes were not accidental. They reflected a man learning to coexist with the life he had built instead of outrunning it. Importantly, there was no public confession tied to this phase, no redemption arc, no apology tour. That absence matters. It signals maturity without performance. Some artists redefine themselves through conflict. Kenny Chesney redefined himself through acceptance. He accepted that solitude was not failure, that independence did not have to mean isolation, that a life lived mostly in motion still deserved moments of rest. This quiet pivot did not make headlines, but it reshaped his relationship with time, with work, and with himself. And for the first time, success stopped feeling like something to maintain and started feeling like something he could simply live inside. The road was still there,
So was the stage, but now they no longer felt like escape routes. Kenny Chesney never announced a final version of himself. There was no statement, no manifesto, no clear dividing line between who he was and who he became. Instead, his evolution revealed itself through absence, the absence of urgency, of explanation, of the need to be understood by everyone. With time, his legacy stopped being about output and started being about alignment. He continued to tour, but on his own terms, continued to release music, but without chasing moments. The industry changed around him, faster cycles, louder narratives, shorter attention spans, and yet he remained steady. That steadiness became his quiet power. What once looked like avoidance now resembled intention. The personal questions that once hovered around his life gradually lost relevance, not because answers were given, but because the need for answers dissolved. He was no longer positioned as a mystery to solve, but as a person allowed to be incomplete in public. That permission matters. Many careers collapse under the pressure of interpretation. Kenny's survived because he stopped offering himself as material for analysis. He let the work speak, and when the work spoke, it spoke of space, memory, and acceptance rather than conquest. Fatherhood, marriage, permanence, these symbols of adulthood were never framed as achievements he missed. They were simply paths he did not take. In their place, he cultivated something quieter, continuity without stagnation. There is maturity in that choice, and courage. Not everyone is built for stillness. Not every life is meant to be symmetrical. Kenny's journey suggests that fulfillment does not require checking every conventional box, only living honestly inside the structure you choose. In later years, his songs feel less like invitations and more like reflections held up to the listener. They ask fewer questions, they provide fewer answers. Instead, they sit with ambiguity, trusting the audience to bring their own meaning. This trust defines his enduring relevance. When the lights fade after a show, there is no illusion left to sustain, only the self remains. For Kenny Chesney, that self appears grounded, not because he escaped restlessness, but because he learned to live beside it. The greatest transformation in his story was never public, it was internal. From movement to meaning, from momentum to measure, from freedom as escape to freedom as acceptance. In the end, his legacy is not the sound of cheering crowds or numbers on a chart. It is the proof that a person can choose their own rhythm and remain whole.